Hey everyone, I'm Selena Hill, and this is the new norm on Black Enterprise, sponsored by Cadillac, where I speak to dynamic leaders, entrepreneurs, and public figures about their latest projects and the impact they're making in today's world. Today, I have the privilege to speak with Dominik Whitehead, Senior Vice President of Campaigns and Mobilization at the NAACP, about the 2024 presidential election and what's at stake for Black communities. Dominik, thank you so much for joining Black Enterprise today.
Thank you for having me, Selena.
So we know that Vice President Kamala Harris electrified Black Americans and young voters after President Biden ended his re-election campaign, and she became the frontrunner on the Democratic ticket. However, a recent New York Times Siena College poll shows that Harris currently holds 78% of the Black vote, down from the 90% of Black voters that Biden captured in 2020. It's also down from 2016 when Hillary Clinton won approximately 92% of the Black vote. Meanwhile, Harris's support among Black men has also dropped, as only 70% said they would vote for Harris, down from Biden's 85% in 2020. So my question to you, Dominik, is why is Vice President Kamala Harris polling so low amongst Black voters?
So a few things. I think one, that's a great question, Selena. And I think it's how you're viewing and looking at polls, right? And so I'll start here. One, we know that Black voters are going to show up and vote. We know Black women vote at 90+% high in favor of progressive and or Democratic candidates. We also know that Black men follows right behind that as the second largest voting demographic in this country at 85, 86+% around that. The other piece we got to take into account, this election cycle has just been a whirlwind this entire year, right? From the lagging of support from lots of different constituents, particularly Black voters from Biden when he was at the top of the ticket. We also have to just remember that Vice President Harris just assumed top of the ticket not even 3 full months ago. And just because she's of color, African-American woman, clearly identifies as a Black woman, does not mean that she automatically get the Black vote, right? And so she is still showing folks who she is on the campaign trail, particularly Black voters in particular. And also, I would say some of the polls don't always necessarily reflect what the larger demographic and base of Black voters are looking for as well, because those polls are oftentimes skewed. I do think NAACP is clearly nonpartisan, but for us, our number one issue is to ensure that voters get the right information about why they should be voting so they can inform their decisions on who they should be voting for based off their interest.
And thank you so much for bringing that up, Dominik. You know, when we look at Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign, from what I see, she is earning the votes. She just released her opportunity agenda for Black men, which is offering $20,000 for Black entrepreneurs to kickstart their businesses. It's investing in Black men's health by doing research on diseases like sickle cell anemia that disproportionately affect Black men. We see that she's trying to give Black men a stake in the cannabis industry. She literally has a clear-cut vision on how to empower not just Black men, but Black communities. However, the pushback that I'm seeing is it's a little too late. Why did it take 2 to 3 weeks out from election day for the Democratic candidate to finally value Black voters enough to create an agenda for us? What do you say to that criticism?
Yeah, I can't speak for the Democratic Party and or the Harris Watts campaign now and how they are engaged. What I will say is that the Black community is not a monolith. The Black community is a loyal base, as we said a second ago, particularly to Democratic and progressive candidates, just based off traditional trends. in terms of election cycles. What I say to that is that Democrats have work to do, right? And so if you are releasing a platform prior to just weeks prior to election day, that means they have a lot of work to do in terms of engaging Black voters day in and day out to really convey that message. One, to convey the message that we see you, we understand your priorities and your concerns. As we all know, the economy, from the research that NAACP has recently done, is the number one issue among all Black voters, among all age demographics within the Black community. And so, therefore, that is something that I will encourage all campaigns, whether Democrat or Republican, who are looking to garner the Black vote or get the Black vote, is to message and engage around the economy. The other piece, but I would say to that as well is I think, and it goes back to specifically to Kamala Harris, it goes back to she is meeting people where they are, right? So think about just last night, the night before last, she did a whole radio podcast live interview. That is very unconventional when you think about a presidential candidate. It's typically one or two television interviews, and that's about it. I mean, for her to go on a platform where millions of Black voters, particularly Black men, listen, right, and engage. And one of the things that I did like about that, when I think about NAACP in our own program, we're spending close to 5 million ourselves in the media blitz across key states, where platforms like the Breakfast Club that Charlemagne hosts and other Black platforms list, where Black voters listen and engage on, and we're pushing out that messaging as well from an NAACP perspective. So I'll say she's meeting folks where they are, and there's a lot of work to do over the next 3 weeks.
To your point, Dominik, she did the interview, the town hall with Charlemagne the God in front of a room full of Black men in Detroit. She did an interview on the Shade Room. She's doing an interview with Chris Paul, NBA star. She is meeting Black people and Black men where they are. She also raised $1 billion. However, this race is neck and neck. And the way the polls look now, if she doesn't get a certain amount of Black voters, like we know she's going to get the mass majority, but if too many of us fall off and don't vote or vote for Trump, that could essentially help decide this election. Where is the disconnect
The
between her
disconnect
and Black voters?
I think the disconnect, I don't know if it's necessarily just on her, right? I think the disconnect is with just overall the Democratic Party. I can also say the Republican Party, but most specifically the Democratic Party and progressives in a way, not engaging Black voters year round, right? The other piece I would say that's very clear, and we want to specifically talk about the vice president, there's a lot of dis and misinformation out that I believe her and her camp, they have to fight back, whether it's information about her record as a DA, as a prosecutor, as Attorney General in California, right? And we know the connection between particularly Black men, but the Black community and the justice system or the judicial system. And I think there's a disconnect there around what it is that she did do and the things that she did not do. And so I think there's just a lot of mis and disinformation there. I think the other piece, there's a messaging piece. And so how do the campaign message deeper into Black community with trusted messengers to really convey the message?
You know, speaking of the Black community and Black men in particular, President Obama's recent comments to a group of Black men in Pennsylvania received lots of backlash from people who felt like he was scolding or even shaming Black men into voting for Vice President Harris. Dominik, do you agree that President Obama missed the mark?
I don't think President Obama missed the mark. I think it was taken out of context, right? I think President Obama was talking to a specific grouping of Black folk, particularly Black men who are truly on the fence. You just, at the top of the segment, you called out some polling numbers that are real, right? And some of these folks are still on the fence, just like they're independent or undecided white voters. There are undecided Black voters out there. And so I think what President Obama was trying to convey between both of the candidates, both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, there's a stark difference between the two of them in terms of the issues that matter most importantly to Black men in the Black community. I don't think it was scolding. I think it was framed in that way. Because to be clear, as I said a second ago, Black men is the second largest voting bloc in this country. So Black men vote, right? Just doesn't mean that any candidate have their vote automatically just because you may be of color or associate yourself with certain things within the community. But I don't think it was scolding. I think it was more of an issue based, and he was trying to convey the message.
Do you feel like the media may be putting too much emphasis on Black men and Black voters because Black voters are still going to turn out in mass and vote for Kamala Harris? Is it that, is it the media that's putting so much emphasis on this key voting block?
I think so. I mean, let's be clear. We saw what happened in Georgia the first day in early vote, right? In Fulton County, right outside of Atlanta, Black county for the most part, right? Numbers, record-breaking numbers in early voting, both absentee ballot and voting in person. So that shows, in terms of a trend, that Black people are voting, right? I do think the media does put a spin on things when it comes to this election or all elections, that it is on the backs of Black folks. And we know Black people is the heartbeat of democracy in terms of saving democracy, and we'll continue to save it time and time again. But I think there's an additional amount of pressure that should not be there, because I don't see that pressure on white suburban moms. And we think about 2016, who was Hillary Clinton's base and did not show up, and was one of the reasons we lost that election.
Good point there. And before we move on, I do just want to add one last thing to this point. What I'm seeing in 2024, I'm seeing a larger number of Black and brown folks advocate for Donald Trump in a loud, bold way. I see them at rallies. I see them in my family, constantly having back and forths. I see them in my church. It's just a lot of arguments. My Uber drivers, my taxi drivers, like I can't escape it. And it is reminding me how important it is for Black voters to go out and vote this election cycle, because it is a neck and neck race. This race is neck and neck. What do you say to Black voters who have been, for whatever reason, leaning more towards Trump? Maybe they weren't back in 2020, or maybe they did so quietly, but they are bold and they are loud.
Yeah, I think that honestly is a good question, and it's a real thing, because we are seeing trends of Black voters voting more conservatively. I would use that. I, I would say this: one, issues matter, right? And folks really need to understand and read the issues. If you go to naacp.org/vote, again, naacp.org/vote. We have an array of resources that really walk through our research, the issues on both candidates, not just the president and vice president, but top of the ticket all the way down to the bottom of the ticket around that. What I say to those Black voters, this election cycle is about our children. It's about our rights. It's about our future. It's about our freedoms. We've seen this time and time again. And we think about reproductive rights, and we think about Black women, right? And Black women are 2 times more likely to die and or have implications in childbirth, right? And so reproductive rights is on the ballot. When we think about voting rights, and all of the attacks that are happening around voting rights, state after state, whether it's Georgia or Ohio or Texas or Florida, our voting rights are literally on the ballot this election cycle. When we think about affirmative action, we saw what happened with the Supreme Court last year around that. That is on the ballot this election cycle, and that impacts people of color, particularly Black people in general. When we think about the economy, there's one candidate who actually has a plan in terms of making sure our lives are better financially, and there's another candidate who has concepts. So let's think about that, right? And I want to go with someone who has a plan. Again, NAACP is nonpartisan. We won't tell folks who to vote for, but we will guide folks on the issues. We will guide folks on making sure folks understand the policies that folks are putting in place, so folks can make the most informed decision and when they're going to the ballot box.
Speaking of the initiatives that the NAACP is pushing to keep folks civically engaged, I understand that the organization is spending $20 million to engage Black voters, including a comprehensive messaging and research program that was launched in September. Can you tell us more about this initiative?
Yeah, we are running a $20 million program this election cycle, or it is in play now, if you will, across 10 key battleground states across the country. Our program is very engaging. Much of what we've been talking about, we're meeting people where they are and talking to people. We are a trusted messenger. We have units across the country on the ground, engaging day in and day out with members of communities or their constituents in those communities about all things election. We think about the work that we're doing. This 20 million, we spent about 3 to 4 million on research this year to really inform us on how we should be talking to Black voters and how we should be engaging Black voters and what tactics we should be doing and where are Black voters, where are they consuming information, like what media outlets are they using, what social media outlets are they using, and so that way we can convey our messages there. We've recruited well over 100,000 volunteers who are making phone calls and sending text messages to date. To date, we're probably well over 4 million text messages sent, probably well over 300,000 phone calls made. And we're still going day in and day out, an aggressive media buy targeting Black men in key demographics like North Carolina and Detroit, Michigan, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as well. And so we are doing the work on the ground day in and day out. And so we are using what we've learned from research to apply that to talk to everyday people.
What is the NAACP doing to directly combat the amount of misinformation and disinformation that we know is targeted at Black voters? We know that even in the 2016 election, 2020 election, there was interference from Russia during this election cycle that was targeted to Black voters. What is your organization doing about that?
That's a great question. We're using data and technology as what I like to say is our best friend these days, because that's where people are. They're on different social and technology platforms. And so we're using that data and taking information and making sure that we are combating that. We're doing that in a lot of different ways, right? One of the ways we're using social media and making sure we're pushing that out to all of our followers and putting real information and factual information out. As soon as we see wrong information, we're engaging directly and correcting that information. We're running an aggressive digital program where we know a lot of young people, especially that 18 to 35-year-old vote, those voters in that demographic or that age group, we are meeting them on the TikTok. That's what they are. We are meeting them on Instagram, Facebook, our YouTube ads, et cetera, and making sure we're taking real information. The final piece on that, our election protection program, because that's where a lot of the misinformation comes from. Our legal team, in partnership with our civic engagement team, is running an aggressive election protection mis and disinformation program where we're getting information in real time, engaging directly in the states and correcting information where we can as a trusted messenger.
Amazing. Dominik, thank you so much, not only for your time today, but for the work that you were doing to inform, educate, and empower Black communities and Black voters. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Only thing I would say, listen, we're 18 days out. We need all Black voters across this country to turn out and show up and do what we know what we can do. We've done it before. We can do it again. Go to naacp.org/vote for all of your voting information, checking your ballots, learning where you need to vote, polling location, or just that last source of information as you're making your final decisions on candidates that you're voting for. It's all on our website.
Dominik Whitehead, thank you so much.